Okay, Kuf Tesah Halacha Gimel. So we're going to read this whole long halacha. Okay, before we start, we had halacha Aleph had been about Chol V'Yisrael, halacha Beis was about Gevin Yisrael, and now halacha Gimel is going to be about this food, chemo, with butter, which we're going to see is going to be in between Chol and Gevin. It's hanging there in between. So what does it say? If a guy made butter that a guy made, people have a minute to be matter. You shouldn't protest that. This is what to be samachan. We're going to see. That's what we're going to talk about. There's 3 sheets in Rishonim. So those who have the minute to eat it as is, that's fine. Don't protest against those. What happens if it's the opposite extreme? If it's in a place where most of the people are machmir, they won't eat it, no matter what. Then English honest, then you shouldn't change, and you should follow that minute. There's a basis for that minute also. But if you're in a place that has no defined minute to eat it and always eat it or to never eat it, then what you should do is as follows, which is the 3rd sheet of Rishonim, in bishla. If you cooked it so much that there's no more droplets of milk stuck inside of it, then it's mutter to eat it. Okay, so the Mechaber had said these 3 sheets. That's what we're going to talk about more. Let's just read the Ramah, and then we'll get back to really what we're here to talk about as the Mechaber. Okay, the Ramah says like this: the last sheet had been that you could cook it, you should cook it to get rid of the drops of milk. And the Ramah says, don't be worried. There's a question, maybe it should be bittul l'chatchila to cook up the milk. And the Ramah says, don't worry, it's not bittul l'chatchila because for a number of reasons. One of the basis is because it's a suffix, if there's even any tzach tzukachov there in the first place. So when there's such a suffix, there's no bittul l'chatchila on the suffix. And there are other reasons given also.
How does the bishul get rid of tzach tzukachov?
We'll talk about it in a second. When we get to these sheets, we'll talk about it. Okay, in bishla avikachavim, if a guy cooked it.
Also, they're not looking to be mevatla per se, not be looking to remove it.
We're going to get to those. That's another part of the reason. When I explain, when we get, I'm just reading it through now, but when we get to it, I'll explain. Another thing is that if a guy cooked it, it's mutter also. Why? The stam kelim in Ibn Yemen, because the stam kelim in Ibn Yemen, this is lafuke. The B'Shezer had brought Rishonim who are machmir, that stam kelim are not, and we don't say stam kelim in Ibn Yemen. They said it's also for that reason. He says, don't worry about it, stam kelim in Ibn Yemen. So if the guy cooked it in his kelim, don't worry about that part of it either. Okay, now, a separate thing. What happens if you go from a place where they don't eat butter, and you go to a different city where they do eat butter? Then you could eat with them. You can't bring some back home and eat it in your hometown. Even though you were allowed to eat it while you were visiting, you can't eat it when you get home. Unless it's obvious that it comes from that place. Now the opposite of what happens if you go from a place where they eat butter and you go to a place where they don't eat butter? Then you can eat it there. What? You cannot eat it there. If you took it from a place where you're allowed to eat it to where you can't eat it, it's also asur. I feel even if there is a hecker, not like he had said earlier, and that's the minute that you don't eat it when you bring it back, even if there's a hecker. Now, just little droplets, like little tiny droplets. So this Ramah, which we're not going to talk about, we actually talked about when in Halacha Beis, we talked about it, has nafkaminas to us, not so much for people going from one city to another, and that's the Meferish thing, had negated to us was whether it came up to whether you have to kasher, you have to kidneys. Okay, if something is also because of a minig, like this kind of food if something is also because of a minig, would you have to kasher kelim when you went between that and somebody who wants to be more machmir, or for us, between something made kidneys for year round and you want to use it for Pesach without that? We talked about it in Halacha Beis. It fit there, so we did it then also. So we're skipping it for now. We're not coming back to it. Okay. So, back to our Mechaber, the main thing that we're here to talk about. The Mechaber had these 3 shittas. Okay, so the Beis Yosef, this very long Beis Yosef, to explain this shittas, what they're trying to say. And it says like this. He says, the sort of like a basic assumption is that the issue of cholav akum, it applies to cholav in its cholav form, when it is as cholav. Once you turned it into something else, once we turned it, in our case, into butter, then if the guy turned it into butter, we're not worried about it as cholav akum anymore. Excuse me, it's not cholav. It's now become chema, it's a new thing, and it's not usher. We spoke about this back in Halacha Aleph, from the Chassam Sofer and Ramosha, who had both said, in two different ways, they both said that the Isser of Cholav Akum is only for the Cholav itself, and it's only if the Yid got the Cholav as milk. If the Yid didn't get it until it was already not milk, in other words, the Chassam Sofer said, if the Yid got it when it was already cheese, it's not Usher as Cholav Akum. It's Usher as Kvinas Akum. It's a separate Isser, but it's not Usher as Cholav Akum. But it's only the issue of Cholav Akum is only also when the Yid gets it, he has to be sure that the person who he got it from didn't dilute it. But he doesn't have to. Other things going on that are not his concern. Okay, it's a special isser that only applies when you get it as milk. So, for example, in our din, had the Yid gotten it as milk and then he handed it to the guy and told him to make butter, that would be usher. Everyone would agree that butter would be usher because it's Cholav Akum. If you take butter, you take Cholav Akum and you make something out of it, of course it stays usher. But the din over here is talking about because the guy made it into butter himself. So when I got it, I got butter. I didn't get milk. I got something that's in between Cholav and Gvina. It's not in the takon of Cholav Akum, and it's not in the takon of Gvinas Akum, so it's just hanging there in between. So Kenzine, it's mutter. That's the shaila. That maybe it should be mutter because it's in between. Okay. So the Shachat has mentioned, and we'll talk about it maybe next time how important this is. What I'm about to say. The Shachat has both mentioned that there's an assumption that you cannot make butter out of treif milk, just like we had an assumption that you can't make gvina out of treif milk. Okay, that we're working with such an assumption that you can't do that. I found a website of somebody who promotes their version of camel butter. Okay, they have their way of making butter out of camel, and they explain the science of why they believe you can't make butter out of camel milk. Be'etzem you can't, because it's our chiddush that we could do it. But be'etzem, in the world you can't because it's missing. You want to know what it's missing? It says glutenin. Okay, it's some kind of a protein. Okay, and it's some other reason, another thing to do with temperature. Why you can't make it? They have their own. Their theory. Whether they're right, I don't have a clue whether that's true or not. But the place is going to work with such an assumption that you can't make butter out of it, and we'll talk about it next time. How important is that? Is that significant or not significant to this din over here? Okay, I don't see the Beis making such a point out of it. The Shachat has both mentioned such a thing that you can't make it, which we accept as the Metzias. Okay, so now. So we have this food that's in between. So the Rambam brings two shittas from Goinim. The first sheet that he brings is that says that butter is mutter. The butter is mutter. It's not cholav, and it's mutter. Now, he also says, to understand the sheet, I have to tell you his second sheet. His second sheet that he brings says that you cannot eat butter. The reason is because of the tzachzuchi cholav that's going to have. While you make the butter, it's true, you can't make butter out of treif milk. But if you had kosher and treif milk mixed together, when the cream would rise up and then you would churn it into butter, there would be droplets of that treif milk might get stuck inside of the butter, and therefore it's also the butter be'etzem is mutter, but the butter has milk inside of it, and that milk that's inside of it, that's cholav akum. So that milk that's inside is still cholav akum. So, and the first sheet holds we're not choishish for that. So what's the machlekes? The Beis Yosef says it on two levels. What the machlekes is between these sheetas. Excuse me. The first is like the first way he explains it is like this: the droplets that are in these tzachzuchi cholav, these tiny droplets. If you looked at them, because if you came across it in the butter, you would be able to see it. You could recognize that those droplets are sitting there and say, yeah, there's the drop of milk that's sitting there in the butter. But somehow, I don't exactly understand what it is, but somehow, even though you could see it, you couldn't get it out. It's not removable. So the machlekes here is a shaila in hilchos bittul, where there's something that you could notice, but you can't remove it, whether such a thing is batal or not. The Goinim who say that it's mutter say, since you can't remove it, it's considered a taruvus. The things are considered mixed together because it's not possible to separate them one from the other. Since they can't be separated, memela, it's a taruvus. And a taruvus, the rules of bittul apply. It's only droplets, it's tiny amounts. So it's batal b'shishim. So when you look at this milk, you look at the butter, you say, the butter is mutter. No, they're so mixed in, they're not part of it, it's batal, and you don't have to be kosher. That's what the first sheet holds. And the Rambam, and the second sheet, the other sheet of Goinim holds that no, since you could notice it, since it's discernible that it's there, even though you can't get it out, it's not batal because it's not considered taruvus. It's considered to be two separate items, and therefore that's not taruvus. So that's what that's how Beis Yosef explains it.
Did they really cook it out?
So the second sheet of the Goinim says, therefore, I should explain it. If you cook the butter, what's going to happen is either in the cooking, the milk will drip out. Okay, so I don't exactly know what that means, but somehow in the cooking, the milk will drip out, or it'll get absorbed. Okay? If it gets absorbed, it'll be bottled also. So the reason why, when you cook it, you're not necessarily going to get the liquid out. Some of the milk will drip out, some of it may get absorbed in, but at the end of the day, there won't be any discernible liquid left at the end. So you're allowed to eat it because the milk will turn to a form that it's going to be bottled. So that's another hezber, that why it's not bittul lechatchila to do it is because you're not necessarily being mabatel it. If you're doing it in a way that makes it get absorbed, that's bittul lechatchila. If you're doing it in a way that makes it drip out, that wouldn't be bittul lechatchila. To get the isur out of the food, that's not bittul lechatchila. Bittul lechatchila is to get it absorbed in. So since it's not clear what's going to happen, it may drip out, it may get absorbed in, therefore it's not, that's another head before it's not bittul lechatchila. And so the second sheet in Goyim says, you have to cook it. If you want to eat it, you have to cook it, meaning you have to make sure that there's no droplets of milk left inside of it. That's what you have to do. Okay, so in other words,
the Shulchan said you can eat it as is. Why don't they say you have to cook it?
Because it already is bottled.
It's because you can't get it out. If you can get it out through cooking.
Oh, so you're saying, why don't they say that you can get it out by bring out?
Well, they say, since you can't for sure get it out because it might get absorbed, so there's no, you don't have to do it.
So that has to do with about that. But whether, when you have something that you can get it in, but you won't get it out, whether you're mechuyev to do that now. But you might not be mechuyev. It's a good question, but I'm not sure.
Was it because there were no gumos in the pepper, so they weren't afraid of the sushuk and
Say it again?
Butter is smoother than cheese. The whole shadow of like cheese, or shadows that there might be some sushuk in the gumos of the cheese. But
okay.
Part of this, it was smooth, so it was okay.
That's not how the Bishop explains it. I don't know enough about butter to tell you the answer to that. I would have guessed that butter has more pores than cheese does. If I was guessing, but the Bishop anyhow doesn't explain that way. He says no. They hold that since you can't get it out, you could see it. It's there, but you just can't get it out. Therefore, it's butter.
The Mekilim have that svara.
They
say that there are no gumos that the Ksupei Cholav are going to be able to remain in. So
I believe that maybe she comes back. No, okay. I don't remember. I don't. The way. We're going to get to today in a second. But I don't remember they said saying that. Could be. I don't remember they said saying it that way. Okay, he said it this way. Now,
you think you're bad? You mean evaporate?
Well, in the heating, I don't get them to move around. I guess they'll just roll off. I'm not sure. I don't know what that means. I don't know how it's going to get.
It's a pot, like a roll off. Evaporate.
Evaporate. I don't know. Years old. Okay. Now, I have to just tell you that when we learned Hilchos Tilorim and Hilchos Tes, I told you then, we're not going to go that over either, but I told you then that this machlokes Rishonim over here that we're talking about was negayah to whether you can eat frozen broccoli without a hechsher. Okay? Anyhow, that had to do with that. Okay? It ended up being, it was totally, that, we talked about in Halacha Test, in Hilchos Tilorim, that this machlokes Rishonim over here has nafkaminas to eating frozen broccoli, meaning not like bodeg type. And it's like, with just, you go to the supermarket and just buying plain old, I don't know, bird's eye brand, whether you could buy that was totally mismachlis. Okay. Now, the Beis Yosef says, really, this machlokes that he just told you is on a deeper level, even told in another shaila, and that is the Gemara gave a few hesberim as to why Gevinas Akum was asur. It gave a few reasons why. One of the Gemara's reasons why Gevina might be asur is because there might be little drops of milk left inside the cheese. Very similar to what we're saying over here. Okay, so the Beis Yosef says. And the other major reason was because they might use kavis nevel. They might use kef rennet to set the cheese. So the Beis Yosef says that machlokes in the Gemara is that this machlokes Rishonim is machlokes which of the Gemara's reasons is the ikar. When the Gemara says the reason is because there might be tzachtzuk chol in the gvina, that Gemara is saying exactly what these Go'anim said, what the second set of Go'anim said, which is there might be tzachtzuk chol that you'll be able to notice, but you won't be able to get out. And the reason why you can't eat the cheese is because it won't be bottled. Exactly like the second set of Go'anim said, you can't eat it because it won't be bottled. When the Gemara says the other reason, that the reason is because you might use kavis nevel, is saying, don't worry about those tzachtzuk chol. Don't worry about that. Those are bottled. They're already bottled the way they are, because you can't get them out. And so and then some other kind of chash with Gevinas Akum. So the machlokes of these Go'anim is it mutter or asur the butter without cooking is really a machlokes of which of the reasons of the Gemara was the ikar reason. Okay. Now I have to tell you the way I just said it is the way I understand it. The way I think that's correct of what the Beis Yosef says. There are others there are two very, very long beer hagros over here. Okay, the two very long ones, very, very uncharacteristic, very long beer hagros over here, and Yud Zayin and Yud Ches. Some people read the beer hagros and Yud Zayin to be saying not like that. Okay, they think that the beer hagros is saying, but I think that if you read Yud Ches also, you get a different hezbollah to it. That really he really is saying what I'm saying. I think that's what they say. So you're free to disagree. You're free to disagree. You can look inside. Okay. Okay. Another thing is that that Gemara at the very end of the Siman brings from Mordechai that the Mordechai said the only kula for butter, the only time we're matir butter is if the cows were milked specifically to make butter out of that milk. That's the only time we're matir. The only start to be matir butter is only in cases if you milk the cows specifically for butter. With the thinking being, if you milk them specifically for butter, you wouldn't put in treif milk because the treif, as I mentioned, from Taz Shot, the treif milk won't turn into butter, and therefore that's why you have to have specifically use cows like that. Okay, if that was true, if we held like this Mordechai, then this whole kula wouldn't be negated nowadays. Because in most cases, people are not, the butter company is not buying milk from someone who milked it special for him. The guy's milking his cows to sell, so to speak, on the open market. And today his customer is a butter company, and tomorrow it's a cheese company, and tomorrow it's a fluid milk company. He has all different customers. He's not milking, it's not like, in a little village someplace, and the guy milks his cows to give to the guy butter next to him. It's just an open market. He's milking his cows.
The milk goes to drink, and the cream goes to butter.
Okay. So you're saying because all the milk is going just for drinking, and they're just skimming off cream to sell something. Oh, okay, even better. Okay. So if we would say like that Moshe, if we would say like this Mordechai that Moshe brings, then the whole thing would not be negated to us nowadays. About what?
About whether or not we're assuming the guy's going to put in treif milk to make cheese at least.
Yes. No, but the Mordechai that what?
The guy's not going to do that.
He's not going to put in treif milk.
He's not right.
No, but the Mordechai says you have to have that in order to make the butter mutter. If you don't have that assumption that he wouldn't put in treif milk, you have to be kosher that he put in treif milk.
Right. I'm saying Tosfos was I think he held that we don't assume that.
We don't assume that.
That guy's going. We don't have to. We're going to the assumption the guy's not going to put.
We can be matir things even without that assumption. You're saying? Okay.
But the assumption is that the guy's not going to put in. At least by cheese, is not going to put in treif milk. It's not going to.
Right. So the question, but in order to be matir butter, do you need that also? Do you have to have that, or could you just buy milk in the store and make butter out of it also?
Right. Listen. So your assumption is that the guy is going to put in, so we have to know that he did it, right?
My assumption is that if he didn't know you were selling it for butter, he might put in treif milk. If he's selling it for fluid milk, just to drink.
Right. So there's other ways that we don't. The assumption is that he's not going to put in.
Even if he sells it for fluid milk?
No, if he is.
Right. That's what. We'll continue. Okay. So that's what the Mordechai says. The Nezer says that even though the document he brings such a Mordechai, he says the Ramah doesn't speak that out. The Ramah didn't bring that halacha when he spoke over the din. So it's more he brings such a shita. He doesn't speak it out, and therefore he believes that although he brings such a shita, he doesn't pass like that, and that the din is not limited to cases when the person made the milk specifically. We're not totally in needing that extra haichacha that if he was making it for butter, he wouldn't have put in the treif milk. It's really going to be get to next time when we talk about some other applications. Okay, and if you look at the Taz is Sivkot in your base, the way he's talking about this din, the implication surely is that it's very likely that there's treif milk in there. Okay? He's not working with milk with an assumption of there's no milk in there. The truth is, we saw it in Beis Yosef also. He was talking about the tzachtzuk chalav, that there was milk left over. He was really concerned that might be treif milk. So was the Taz. The Taz talks about it in a little more of a clear way. Not like this Mordechai that we have to work with milk, that we're working with an assumption that there's no treif milk in it. Okay. So these two shittas that we had so far, the two shittas in the Goinim, these two shittas in the Goinim both said that butter is not chalav. It's not chalav and it's not gvina, and it would be mutter. The first sheet in the Goinim said it's mutter as is because any little droplets of chalav are bottle, and the Ram said no, it's not. The second sheet, which is what the Ram seems to accept, the second sheet of the Goinim is it's only mutter if you did something to make sure that liquid was gone or bottled in a way that it would not, because as is the droplets would be a problem. There's a third shita, the shita of the Rashba says, and the Rosh seems to accept it also. The Rosh says, I don't know what the reason for this is, but this is what everybody does. Okay, but it's a shita that the Rashba brings, which is that the butter is usher, and the reason is because the Rashba says it's because it's a loy plug. Okay, it's a loy plug that since it's not clear to me what his loy plug is. There's two ways. Let's say that this way, which is the loy plug is, since it's possible that there's treif milk into there, we said it could be that there's tzachsuch echolov in there. It is possible that there's treif milk into there. So the fact that the treif milk is bottled, or the fact that the treif milk you can get rid of the treif milk doesn't make a difference. Once the chacham asher cholov, anything that has any dairy product that may have milk inside of it is included in the gzera, even though technically the chacham shouldn't have asked this food, because they should have said, come on, it's bottled, or you can just cook it and it'll be bottled. The Rav says it doesn't work like that. And once it has possibilities of having cholav in it, then it's also as cholav akum, because it's but look, once it has any within the range of things, it's also. So that's one way of understanding it. It could be he meant his loy plug to mean it's kvinas akum. It really isn't clear which way he meant it. There are people who understand it both ways. I said it to you the way the cholav way. Okay, so the Mechaber brought these 3 days. The first one he said that there are people who have a minhag that they're matter it without any cooking at all. Okay, that was the first sheet in the Goyim. Okay, then he said if there are other people who are completely matter, who says it's also no matter what you do. That was the Rajbu or the Rosh who said there's such a minhag to do like that. And the third, which is the sheet that the Mechaber seems to think is correct. Okay, he leaves it off as if you don't have a minhag, this is what you should do, as if that's what he thinks is correct, is that you should do what the second sheet of the Goyim, which is what the Rambam seems to take, which is you have to be concerned about tzachsuch echolov, but you have to do something to get rid of them. And if you do that, then you can eat the milk. You don't have to be, and it's more you can eat it as is. You know what I'm saying?
No, he's explicit in what he says is bishul. If you mevashel it, that's so he say do something, So
but he says okay. So I say do something because I did say do something because the Mechaber says you should cook it. Okay, cooking is not. He doesn't mean dafka cooking. You just do something. Nowadays, which is where we're heading to nowadays, we don't see tzachsuch echolov in our butter. So whatever they're doing other processing to it that makes sure there's no tzachsuch echolov in it either. So the cooking is not like there's a halach lemon shusini. You have to do cooking. For him, cooking was the way you got rid of it.
You don't say yes, it dava kimo bishul. You say that's not his formulation.
In Bishul, he says in Bishul, but he doesn't mean it specifically. We're not going. We don't.
It's an application.
Yes, correct. The milk is cooked, but the butter is not cooked. But we have a different way of getting rid of this stuff. Okay, and next time we're going to even more not giving it. Cooking per se is not what we're looking for. We'll do something to get rid of the tzachsuch echolov. Okay. Okay. So now, what the Mechaber said, many people followed what the Mechaber said, which was either they didn't have a minhag or they specifically had a minhag to be matzah butter. For sure, with the cooking, so to speak, what we have, the common butter that we have would qualify for that. And there were many people who did that. Okay, that was pretty. There were many people who accepted that. There are people who have, of late, been saying that maybe that's not true anymore. Okay, when I'm collecting, this is 3 different people who spoke about this at different stages in their lives. Zisha Blech, Aaron Gordimer, and Kiva Shapadwa, okay, all of them, but they all said very similar things, okay, and they said 3 things. They're all people who know lots about dairy, as you know, who said the same things. Now, they have 2 different things to say about 2 groups of things to say about dairy, and what's most important to us is the first one, which is there a reason to say that the tzad of what the Mechaber said, that it's not cholav and there's no tzachsuch echolov, is that still true anymore? And that is. So they want to say is the first point that they're trying to make is that nowadays there is cholav inside of the milk, inside of the butter. Even though in the days in Shulchan Aruch there was no milk in the butter, there was no milk inside the butter, but nowadays there is. So now, before I tell you what they're going to say, when we say that there's milk in there, we're not trying to hear is there possibly milk. We say is there milk that's not bottled. But that's what the sheet these 2 sheets of Goyim are saying, is that if the milk is in there but the milk is bottled, that's okay. They're arguing as to what it takes to make it bottled. Is it automatically bottled? We have to do something to make it bottled. But milk that's in there that's bottled, that didn't bother anybody. It's only if there's milk in there that's not bottled. Okay, so in listening to what they're saying, that's what the criteria we're thinking about if it's not bottled. So one of them they say is that in order to make milk taste better, in order to make butter taste better, things are put into it. Starter distillate, diacetyl, these are different enzymes that can be put into it, or flavor, or chemicals that are put into it that can make it taste. And it's true, those can be made out of milk. It's not far fetched that they should be made out of milk. Starter distillate, obviously, and diacetyl, and diacetyl, and diacetyl.
And what?
Yes, diacetyl. So I'll explain the joke after it. Anyhow, so it's made out of milk. Yeah, so it's made out of milk. So okay, those things are put in tiny amounts, but those things are a vidal time or a maimed. They have an effect on the strong effect on the flavor of the butter. So if you feel that the chashash goes into those things, which is logical, things that are not bottled, those things would not be bottled, they would put in, then you say is, the butter that I have is not butter that doesn't have tzachzuch in it, so to speak. It has in it milk that would not be bottled. And if it has milk that wouldn't be bottled, then the whole tzad l'hakol falls off. The whole idea that you want to be makel is based on it's not possible that there's milk in there that would be bottled. And they're saying, no, it is possible there would be. Okay, now.
So they're saying it's these things in it that, fine, the butter's mutter, but you got other stuff in there that's not Chol Yisrael. Is that, or they're saying, no, the whole din changes, and therefore now the butter itself falls within the Xeria. I understand the first one, not the second one.
The first one.
Okay.
If those things are not bottled, correct. If those things are not, the butter stays mutter, but there's something in there that's sorry chash. Well, you could call it sorry chash, but I mean, the basically it's like sort of like the issue of chol akum continues onto this food because the chol might be mixed into. In other words, it's not like you're buying cookies.
It's like I'm finding my pretzel has some of this stuff.
I think that's extreme. I don't think that they're learning it that way. It could be. I don't think they're learning like that. It's like it's like pretzels that have whey inside of them. I don't think they're learning like that. They sound like the issue of chol akum continues if the chol might still be in. It changed forms, but it still has a little left in the original form, so it's still chol akum. That the liquid of it is still chol akum.
That's true. I thought they're saying at the end of the process, they're adding some additional milk, sort of like as a finishing touch or something.
And therefore what?
No, and therefore you basically had butter that was 100% fine, 100% kosher, and now it's like you're adding a treat.
So you're saying
it's like you're adding something not kosher.
I'm saying exactly what you're saying. I think you're right, but what if don't do the end?
You say
whatever's put in.
That's not right. You're saying basically you're saying it like this. If in the case of the butter of the Shulchan is talking about, the tzachzuch that might be there are residual milk that was left over. So if the original milk was not kosher. If I would have wanted to, I couldn't drink it because it would have been chol vakum, and some of that issue might have continued on. As opposed to what I'm telling you could have started distillate is you had milk that theoretically was fine. Someone threw in some started distillate into the thing. So he was like he could have put in anything else into the treif into the either. So it's like sort of like coming from the outside of the chashash. Okay. Okay. I didn't hear it that way, but okay, I can hear that.
They're throwing it also. These same authors are saying it. Just like you have other Kashrus problems with today.
No. The question is it a chol yisrael? No. I'll tell you what the point here is. We'll talk the regular Kashrus chashashas in a second. Kashrus chashashas don't scare me because you just buy stuff with the hechsher on it. Because I could just buy the chol of stam butter with the hechsher on it. The question is, if I want to eat it, I say I only eat chol yisrael. So if I only eat chol yisrael, can I eat this and say the mechaber said butter is mutter?
You have to use chol yisrael started this way.
What do you say?
You have to use chol yisrael started this way. You're not getting that someplace.
I have to use chol yisrael started this way, or else you're saying I have chol akum mixed into my food. So you think it's a kashrus concern, not a chol akum. Well, ends up being a chol concern. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, I didn't see that, but okay, I see that.
Okay. If I break stone butter, for example, and it says milk, natural flavors.
Yeah.
It says there, milk and natural flavors. So that natural flavors could be a form of what? Chol stam.
It could be anything. Yeah.
Because it does have an asher, it's butter. But it does have an outside something in there that might prevent me from using that butter.
My question is whether that other thing that's in there is a cholav problem. So I was just saying is it chol within what the mechaber is saying? And they're saying is let it not. It's not exactly what the mechaber said. The mechaber is talking about that there's leftover milk. There's leftover milk from the production because there was pig's milk in it in the first place. There's leftover milk, and now that transferred, so the whole thing stayed chol. They're saying this is an outside thing in it.
Right. I'm asking you a question now. Can I go ahead? If I keep chol yisrael at home, I keep chol yisrael. Can I go ahead at the store and buy great stove butter and use it with mayonnaise?
So we're saying no because that other thing that might be in there.
So it's extra lavar, such a thing. I could call up the OU and say, "Break." So what is that natural flavor?
I wasn't clear. The fact that you could be mevar whether it has it or doesn't have it through asking the Mashiach is not going to do the trick.
Why not?
Because the fact that they do sometimes put that in means is there is a chash that this thing has chol akum inside it.
Why? It's from an outside. It's from an outside. They know what's going in it. right? There's no other milk.
So you're right. If you think of it, I guess that's the difference. If you think of it as an outside thing that someone maybe threw something in, I'll be mafar that they didn't throw something in.
I think that's what's
another way to explain it.
I'm not saying anything different. I'm just saying it's a church. At the end of the process, is going to add something in.
That's not what I was saying. My point is that just like we worry about tzchuch, so it doesn't help to be mivar that. It doesn't help to say maybe the guy only used kosher cows. It doesn't help because it's chalvakim. Chalvakim
is not the challah that made the butter. That challah we took care of already. This is new challah. This is new challah.
So you think since it's a new challah that's added in, it's not in the. Okay, but even the mechaber is the
butter that's also because it's a tzchuch chol. It's a tzchuch chol that's also the butter's mutter.
Right.
So I don't care what they added it. It's only the chol part that's also. So if they put it started this late, that's a problem. They don't put it in. I find out they didn't put it in. It's not a problem.
So if I find out through regular birurim that they didn't put it in. Right. So I'm saying because she says chol akum because they could add treif into it. They could add other milk into it. But says, no, we don't add treif milk into it. You're saying I can be involved that they didn't add it in through regular birurim, not through chol yisrael kind of birurim.
To redefine the original milk as chol of stock. That's the fact that they could have done it. I don't think so.
Okay, fine. I hear it.
Like my pretzel. If I find out my pretzel has no chol akum problems, I don't need birurim on the chol akum level.
So the difference is, and your point is that the difference is in the mechaber's case, it was coming from its dairy sources that we had this chashash. It's because it was milk, and that the milk turned into butter, that maybe that milk had something treif from the beginning inside of it. That's what made it worse. The milk itself, the original source that it came from, as opposed to here, the original milk was safe. I mean, the part that turned into the butter is butter. We're okay with that part. It's just somebody threw something on the outside. That's a regular chashash. Maybe they're doing the outside. Sure. Got it. Okay, good. Okay, good point. Fine. So I'll throw. And I'm chips right in front of the okay, so the
butter. We make butter, right?
So the
Okay,
the other thing is, aside from the things like the start distillate, the other things that are along the same lines that everyone's saying here is I'm wrong about. I get it. Okay.
No, we're not.
You're right.
You're right.
I can handle it. Okay. So the other thing is that there are people who add in actual milk or so milk powder later on in the process. Okay.
That's the next thing. Milk powder.
No. We'll just assume for today that milk powder is milk powder is for the next time. That's correct. But we'll assume that there are butter making machines that let you put other things in at the end. Okay, and there are powders that they put in water and oils to adjust it, and they can put milk in at that point also. And part of the thing is that when you make butter, you're looking for a certain amount of what's called non-fat solids in the food, and sometimes you put in other things to help build that up. I don't believe that those things that would be put in would be to the amount that's not butter. Okay, it's hard to imagine. The amount of non-fat solids you're supposed to have in cheese is about 2%. So how much would you be adding of other stuff to get it to 2% in butter? It's hard to believe that that's such a real chashash.
Well, what's the reason you're adding this amount?
You need the people are expecting a certain thing from the milk. If the milk doesn't have enough solids to it, the butter doesn't have enough solids to it, you get other things in just to fluffen it up, to boost it up.
Yeah.
But the goal is 2%. So how much could you be adding in? How much could it be short? So again, it possibly can add it in. But we saw that the only chashash is when they put in an amount that's not butter. Okay. Now that's for the first chashash. Now the second chashashas are there are general kashrus concerns. We talked about most of these before. There are general kashrus concerns about butter, and those are what he just mentioned, which is when you make butter out of sweet cream. That's the cream that comes right off of regular milk. You could also make butter out of whey cream, because that's the cream that comes off that's recovered after you made whey. The whey itself has kashrus concerns, as we talked about plenty of times. Okay, so that's a concern. Theoretically, that is a concern. That means don't just go buy butter in the street. But that's a concern that you could take care of by having hashgacha on it. If it has hashgacha, they make sure they don't do that. Okay, now it used to be. I say this because this keeps coming up because it used to be that the government grades butters by how they taste. Okay, grade double A, and this is counterintuitive what I'm about to say. Okay? Grade double A tastes the worst, the blandest, and grade A tastes pretty bland, and grade B tastes pretty good. Okay, so the lower grades taste better. Okay,
what's the top?
Double A is the best, tastes the most bland. Okay, it's the idea is
double A is
the government is rating it really the way the ratings work is by how good of a cream did you use to make this? When you make butter out of the best cream, it tastes the blandest. When you use it out of the worst cream, like when you use whey cream comes from cheese, it has a cheesy flavor to it. So most people think that's good. but it shows a lack of purity to the butter that you made, so it gets a lower grade to it, even though everybody thinks it tastes better. Okay, that's how people want it to taste. They taste more buttery, and like put diacetyl because it makes it taste buttery, and you put in whey cream because it makes it taste. It's a chemical. It tastes buttery. Yes, it comes from milk, and so it tastes buttery. It has a buttery taste to it, but that's a lower grade. So people used to say that you could buy double A butter because you knew they only made it from sweet cream. That's what they would make it from. So you can have a Kashrus of whey cream. Nowadays it's not so true. Nowadays people throw in a little whey cream. The idea is, as long as the person who has to taste it doesn't taste such a buttery taste, you can get double A.
That's still how it goes. They don't test it in a lab.
Right. So you can get away with a certain amount of whey cream. Right. I can't pronounce the word, but it's some kind of organoleptic, something like I can't pronounce.
So guys, walk start looking.
So if you then they can put a certain amount of whey cream. Now, Rabbi Padua has another word I can't pronounce. Another word. There is a way to test it, see if it has whey cream. There's like a test that you could do on it. So I guess you could do that. Okay, and then there's other chashas. Other people put other things to make it taste better. Again, as I told you, the better butter tastes worse. So they put in lipase that comes from animal throats. They put in lactic acid, diacetyl, culture, starter distillate, all kinds of other exciting things. But all those things are not, those are not, we're not thinking about Chol Yisrael concerns. Those are just general Kashrus concerns that the Hashgacha would take care. And what everyone here is pointing out is that even my Chol Yisrael concerns are also only Chol Yisrael concerns, only, so to speak, ingredient concerns. If I see the stuff with a good hashgacha on it, and they would tell me, oh yeah, that flavor has a flavor, but the flavor is not whole, then I can really get away with it. Okay, so now,
What about the tzartzuchim?
So I mentioned like in passing that we're not concerned about tzartzuchim. We don't see that anymore. Look at it, you don't see any droplets. So it's as if what the Rambam said it was cooked. It was cooked per se.
You say that all of our butter is either cooked or there's some other process that achieves what the Mechaber was referring to. Is that a fair statement in terms of
I think
butter
so.
production?
That's my assumption. I believe that's true. You could prove me wrong, but I believe that's true. Okay, now I'm just going to end by telling you that we talked about the butter per se. The din right here about butter. But in Mitzvah Shem, for next time, we're going to talk about two applications of this din, two very lamaisa applications of the two or potential applications of this din, which are milk powder and acid casein. Okay, that's two Mitzvah Shem for next time of two very real modern applications to maybe that the head of butter should be matter, certain other things also.